Let's learn how to vibe code an app from start to finish. We'll get an idea and take that all the way to production, all without writing any code, and all within this one video. I'm going to show you in detail how I go about vibe coding and creating web apps. And don't worry, even if you're a complete beginner, you'll be able to follow the entire video because I'll be explaining in detail everything that I do. I'll be explaining key concepts along the way, and like anything, vibe coding is also a skill, so you have to learn and practice in order to get better at it. Also, if you ever get lost, there is a detailed guide in the description on my process on how I go about vibe coding. Also, all of the links, commands, code, the prompts that I use, they're all in the description. So if you ever get lost, you can always check that out. All right, so let's get started. Now there are a few tools that we need to download because these are going to be the tools that we use to vibe code. The first one here is the Cursor IDE. It's an editor that we use to write any code that we want to do, but it also has a chat agent that allows us to communicate with it, and it writes the code for us. All you need to do is go to the Cursor website at cursor.com and download its executable. You can click on the download button in the upper right and install Cursor. The next thing is something that I use in my process, and that's Claude Desktop. I primarily use this for the initial creation of the project, but there are some other tools out there that do this just as well. This is just my current preference on how to start the web app. So you can go to claude.ai/download and then download the Windows installer or the Mac OS installer and install this to your computer. As an alternative to the desktop app, maybe you're running on Linux, there is a command line tool called Claude Code. And while I haven't really tested this out, they did recently put this in the Pro subscription for Claude Pro, but I won't be showing the whole process of using Claude Code in this video. Another thing that we need to download is Git, and this is a version control system. Essentially, imagine that this is like putting checkpoints in our code so that we can revert back to them if we ever need to. Sometimes when you're working with AI models, it can massively change your entire code base. Also, it doesn't always go the way that you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to put different checkpoints at different stages of our application. So when we develop a feature, we might checkpoint there. And then when we develop another feature or we get something worth being put into production, we might checkpoint at that point too. And if at any point the AI completely messes up our code base, we don't have to worry about it because we can always revert back to a previous checkpoint. So to download Git, we go to git-scm.com and then we scroll down a little bit and you can download for the particular operating system that you're on. I'm on Windows again, so I would download the Windows installer and install Git. The last thing that we need to download is Node.js because this will be our runtime environment for when we're actually running our code. We need this platform in order to run our code on top of it. You can download the executable for Linux at nodejs.org/en/download, and you can download for your particular operating system. I am currently using Windows, so I would download the Windows installer. And if you're following along, that's all you will actually need to do. But I also do all of my development inside of WSL, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. It's essentially running Linux on your Windows computer. However, it's completely unnecessary. You will be fine just using Windows to do all of your development. Now, once you download and install those three applications, we can actually get started on our idea. So the idea for a web app that I have is creating a dream journal so that users can write down their dreams and potentially remember them so that they could then, lucid dream. There are a lot of studies that show that writing down your dreams right after you wake up will actually improve your concept of knowing that you're in a dream, and then you'll start lucid dreaming. So what I want is for users to be able to write down their dreams and then submit them. And then what will happen is we'll use AI to give them insights on their particular dream. So in order to get started on that, I need to come up with a name. Now, whenever you're coming up with a name, you need to keep in mind that you want to be able to get a domain for that name. Domains are just a URL that you type in to navigate to that website. What's nice is there are a ton of different websites that sell domain names to you. The one that I'm going to use because it'll help us get some ideas is called Hostinger. On this platform, we can select get a new domain and then type in whatever we're trying to think of as a name for what we want. Or we can use this generate domain using AI. All we have to do is write a short description about our project and we'll get some recommendations of domains that are available that we can buy. So I'm just giving a brief description by saying a dream journal app that uses AI to give insights about your dreams. And then we can just hit generate. Now we have a list of different domains that we can choose from. We can also see more options, more domains. And if you don't like any of these, you can go back and hit generate again. Now from here, you can purchase a domain if you see one that you like. And once you purchase one, like I did here, I purchased dreamsaver.com, we now have a URL available to us that we can give to our product. Next, the thing that can make or break your application is how you initially generate the code. It's really important to plan out and write down everything that you want to have happen inside of the web app. If you don't plan this out, the structure of your code and how the AI actually generates code will kind of be a mess, and you'll end up with a lot of bugs, some hallucinations by the AI, or even if it just can get off track or too eager and start creating features that you never asked for. So this is where something like VibeCodeDocs.dev comes in. This web app allows us to create documentation for us tailored directly for the application that we're trying to write. It makes the whole vibe coding process so much easier and keeps it on track. Now, you could easily just write this documentation yourself, but this is a nice to have because it speeds up the process. Also, the first project that you create once you sign up is completely free, so it doesn't hurt just to try it out. Once you sign in, you can just create your first project by either clicking on this Create Your First Project button or going up here in the upper right and clicking on New Project. Now we just describe our project in as little detail or as much detail as we want inside of this description box. Okay, so I've written out my vision or description of this project, and I'll just read it out to you, but I remember we also have this prompt inside of the description, so you can go check it out there. So I said, a web app that tracks your dreams and gives insights of using AI. We'll use Gemini AI to give insights. The app should be stylized and somewhat dreamy. There should be a landing page describing the product along with a text box for users to submit their first dream. This will sign the user up and submit their dream. The user will have a dashboard page that displays all of their recordings. If they click on a recording, they should be taken to another page that contains their recording and meta information, as well as the AI insight/significance. For the free tier, they'll be able to record as many dreams as they wish, but they'll only get 5 free AI insights. There will just be one subscription that allows them unlimited AI insights for $8 per month. So this seems like a decent description for the entirety of the minimal viable product. Of course, we could add more features here, but I want to keep it simple so that we can get a product created, after which we can make some more features. So I'll hit the next button to generate the questions. So now in this app, it gives me a questionnaire, and I need to answer each one of these questions in order for it to generate the best documentation that it can. Now, these questions are tailored specifically for my app that I just described, so they should be pretty on point. This first one says, beyond simply tracking dreams, what specific needs or pain points do you foresee the primary target audience having that this application, particularly the AI insights, will address? Describe your ideal user, their typical habits, and why they would choose this app over alternatives. So I answered this question with, this app allows the user to fulfill their desire to lucid dream. It also gives the user a place to see all of their recorded dreams that they may have forgotten. Ideally, my user would open this app first thing in the morning and write down their dream. Now, I won't bore you by going through every single question and talking about it. We also have a button here that says Get AI Suggestions, so we can actually use AI here to answer all of these questions. So when I get a response back for this question, which was what precise meta information am I talking about, it actually gives me different options here that I can choose from, or just get ideas about what meta information I was talking about in the description. So that's neat. I click on one of these options and it fills in the answer for me. I'm going to fast forward through answering all of these questions so that we can get to the actual generation of documents. There is something very important that I want to explain because it comes up in the questionnaire that we have on VibeCodeDocs. We need to understand how web apps actually work from an architecture perspective. There are 3 important pieces to almost every web app that you see online. Those 3 pieces are the front end, the back end, and the database. So what do we mean by those buzzwords? Well, the front end is basically everything that you see on your browser. Let's take x.com for example. You can see how we have this big X, it's some logo here on the left, and then on the right here we have some text saying happening now, and then we have a few buttons here. Well, all of this is laid out as a front end code. Basically, our browser is taking code that we've written for the front end and then rendering it out so that we can view it with all of its different stylings. The back end is how we control the logic of things that you action on the front end. So say we wanted to create an account on x.com, we would click on create account, and then we would fill out all of this information and we'd send it off to the backend so that the backend can do some controller logic and then respond back with a successful creation of your account. The backend could be doing things like saving data, or with our case, we could be getting the Gemini AI responses back from Gemini. And then once all of the actions are done on the backend, it then responds back to the front end saying whether there was a successful success or a failure. Now you'll notice a key point in that I said it could potentially be saving data, which a lot of the times it's either saving or updating some data. Like if we were to create our account, we'd put a name in. So I'd put my name Hunter, and then I'd put some phone number in, and we'd send that back to the backend. Well, now that's some data that we want to preserve. To do that, we store it in what's called a database. It's where we store data. Then later on, our front end might request that data. So it's going to send a request to the backend. The backend is then going to fetch the data that it needs for that particular request. Say it wants to grab my name, and then it responds back with my name. Now with those three key components of our architecture, we can now visualize what technologies we want to use for each one of those. Now for these technologies, what we want to do is we want to pick what's the most popular, because that's going to be what the AI is trained on. And for obvious reasons, we want to use what the AI is trained on because we're going to get the best results, at least from a coding perspective, by choosing those particular technologies. So for the front end, we're going to use a few different technologies, and we want to make the AI aware of them. The first one is React, and that's going to be how your front end functions. You can think of it like how it maintains the data or how it navigates from page to page, how things kind of function within the app. The other two pieces of our front end is going to be ShadCN and Tailwind, and these are going to be how it looks, how it's styled. So back to our x.com example, you can see we have what's called a modal here, and it displays on top of the rest of this landing page. You can see we also have some stylings for these different buttons, different layouts, different colors and fonts, and all of this for us is going to be managed through ShadCN as well as Tailwind. Again, we're choosing what we think is going to be the most popular and going to give us the best results. For our backend, we're choosing Next.js. And along with it being very popular, what we're going to also use is a web app called Vercel, and that's going to be our deployment layer. When we are ready to deploy to production so that we can run the code indefinitely and securely and easily, we're going to use Vercel to do that. Funnily enough, Vercel created Next.js, so they work very well together. For our database, we're going to be using what's called Supabase. And the reason for this is it actually doubles as an authentication layer. So when users want to sign in or create accounts, we can use Supabase to do all of that. Now, the underlying database is PostgreSQL inside of Supabase, but we don't really need to worry about that. We do need to know that it is using the structured query language, which is SQL, but just so you know, we're using Supabase as our database layer. Okay, now I've answered all the questions. I'm going to hit next and go to the name of the project. Now, of course, we already have our domain, we already have our name, so we can just write our name here. I named my app Dreamsaver, and now I'll click Generate Documents. Now that we're on our dashboard, we just wait for all the documents to get generated, and then we can download them. Once it finishes generating, we can click on it and check out the documents. So on this page, we get a quick look at the documents on the left, and we can also download them over here on the right. Now, we can either download them individually here, or we can click Download All Documents, which will just merge all of the markdown files into one markdown file. I'm gonna click on Download All Documents so that I have just a single file. Now, once you save that file, we need to open up Claude Desktop to initialize our code generation. So now that we're in Claude Desktop, we kind of want to change it into something that can actually output code to a file or to folders. To do that, we need to install some MCP tools. Don't worry too much about how it operates. Just imagine that these tools can be called by the AI and do certain things. In particular, for our use case, we want it to be able to write out to files so that it can just generate all of the code and write it directly to our folder. So the first thing that we need to do is edit a single file. To do that, up here in the upper left where this hamburger symbol is, we click on it and then go to File and then go to Settings. Inside of Settings, we can click on Developer, and now we'll have this little window where we can get started with configuring our first MCP tools. To do that, click on the Edit Config button and it will open up your File Explorer, and it will have the configuration file highlighted for you that you can double click on or right click and then go to Open With, and you can open with either your Notepad, or if you have any other editor on your system, you can use that as well. So I'll click on Sublime Text because I have that installed, but you can also just use Notepad. When you open up the file, it should look something like this, which it has the MCP servers object here, and inside of it, it will have these two curly braces. This is where we want to add our code. Here I'm adding this MCP tool called desktop-commander, and I'm using the command npx to run it. and the arguments -y so that it automatically says yes to any prompts. And the actual package is at wondery-er/desktop-commander. This is the one that's going to allow us to basically write to files or do anything on our computer. Now, again, all of this code is in the description, so don't worry if you don't catch it here. You can just copy and paste it from the description and you should be good to go. But it is using the command npx, so make sure that you have that Node.js installed, and then we can save this file and restart Claude. Once you save the file, the actual settings won't show up here, so we have to restart Claude in order for them to show up. Now, Claude does run in your sys-tray, so to restart it, open up your sys-tray by clicking on this caret symbol in the bottom right if you're on a Windows machine, and then you have the Claude icon up here. You can right-click it and hit quit. You can also quit out of it by going to this hamburger symbol and then clicking on File and then selecting Exit. Now we can open it back up, and if we click on this little settings for search and tools, we'll be able to see that we have the Desktop Commander tool right here. If we click on that, we can see all of the different functions that it has available to it. And now we can start generating our code. To do that, I'm using the Claude Sonnet 4 model. You could use Opus as well. It's saying that it's the powerful large model for complex challenges. It might be useful for this case, but it also might be slower, and you may not have as many attempts at it as you do with the Claude Sonnet 4. So we first need to bring in that markdown file. Now there's a bunch of different ways to do this. You can hit the plus sign here and then upload a file, and then find it on your desktop. Mine is in my downloads folder, so I'll click on Dreamsaver All Documentation. And now I have that uploaded. Now I do want to prompt this with some specific verbiage so that it keeps on track and continues on until it finishes. So I'm adding this in here that says create this web app in the projects folder under Dreamsaver. For any API keys or secrets, put them in a .env.local file so that they can be set later. Use the most recent versions for packages and third-party dependencies. And you can see down here written in tiny print, it says 1086 lines. So this is a pretty beefy document, and it's going to be able to go through this and just start cranking out all of the code that we need. So let's hit enter and start it running. Now, if it's your first time using this, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to use this external integration with Desktop Commander? I'm going to say always allow because I don't want this to keep popping up and I have to keep clicking it. But just be aware on other MCP tools that you're using that they could be malicious, they could be nefarious, so just be hesitant on what you allow to run on your computer. Now I'll just let this run through. Sometimes it runs out of its message context and you just have to reply to Claude with continue in order for it to continue generating all of the code that you need. All right, now we finished the initial app creation, and you'll know because it'll write out a bunch of things. It won't be with all these different commands like it does up here. You can see that it's still generating stuff. And then finally it's like, hey, we've completed it. We've tested it. Things work. And you can scroll down and see all this and read it all. So now we can start working on this in Cursor. So now that we're in Cursor, we need to open up our folder. And to do that, we can go to File and then click on Open Folder. Now just navigate to where Claude put your project, and you can click on it and then click Select Folder. Now that we have it open, you can see on this left-hand sidebar, we have a bunch of files and folders and such. If you don't have this left-hand sidebar or the right-hand sidebar up here in the upper right, we can toggle whether we have the primary sidebar, which is the left one, the AI pane, which is the right one, or the panel at the bottom, which will have our command line. So I'll click on the bottom one to bring up the terminal. And from here, this is where we actually can run our application. But first, we have a few setup things that we want to do. First, we want to give our agent a few rules so that it follows them precisely, so that we don't have more hallucinations or that it just goes off, becomes eager, and creates some features that we never asked for. So to create these rules, we go in the upper right and we click on this cog to open the cursor settings. From here, we can navigate to rules, and under rules, we scroll down to project rules. Now I realized that we didn't bring in that documentation that we got from VibeCodeDocs.dev. Over here on the left-hand side, you can see that documentation doesn't exist. So we need to add that to our project. I just open up my file explorer, find where the documentation file is, and then just drag and drop into the panel over here, and it should copy it. Now under cursor settings and project rules, we'll want to add a rule. And here we'll name the rule, and I'll name it docs. And now we need to set the rule type, and we have it as manual, but we want to have it set as always because we want the agent to always be aware of this documentation so that it never gets out of line. So for this rule, I put the following documentation has all of our features and requirements for this project. Keep this doc in your memory so that you can stay aligned. And then to reference the doc, you put an @ symbol and then start typing. So I type Dreams, and I have Dream Saver all documentation. And now it will reference that documentation anytime we start a chat with the AI or anytime that we're even conversing with the AI. So once we Control S to save it, we can then close out of it. And now that's done with all of our project rules. Now let's try to run the app and see what the AI gave us. In order to run this particular application with Next.js and everything, we first need to install all the dependencies. Now Claude already did this, but I want to just make sure that I installed all of them. So to install all of them, you can put npm install, and it should install every single dependency for this application. Now, once it's installed everything, you might have something here where it says to address all issues, including breaking changes, run npm audit fix -- force. And this is because we have 3 vulnerabilities. 2 of them are low and 1 is critical. So I'm going to run this command just to be safe so that our application doesn't have any vulnerabilities. Now, once that's cleaned up, we can run npm run dev to run our application. So we'll type out npm run dev and then hit enter. Now it takes a little bit to build and start up, but once it does, we can check it out in the browser. So now that the application is ready, we can control and click to follow the link of localhost :3000, and it takes us to our browser. Now it's loading and it takes a little bit for it to compile and load, but if there's any problems or anything, it does show a error panel that you can see any issues that you might be facing. So now that we've encountered our first bug, we can start to use the cursor AI to resolve this. So the error also shows up in here. We can see that we have the full error output here. Now, if we highlight the whole thing, the whole error message, and then copy it, we can then go to our agent client window over here and chat with the agent. All we have to really do is just paste in this error and then hit enter and just let the Claude model do all of the work for us. It looks like it found the issue. Some file requires this auto prefixer package, but the package doesn't exist in our dependencies. So let's go ahead and let the AI run this command and hopefully it fixes our issue. Once it's installed, you can go ahead and run the app again by doing that npm run dev, and it should be ready, and now we can test it again. So now that it's running, it tells me we have another error, and it's the Supabase URL is required. Well, we actually haven't set up Supabase yet, so that makes sense why we have this error. So let's set up Supabase. You can do that by going to supabase.com, creating an account. Once you create your account, you need to create an organization, and this will just be where your projects exist. So I'm going to leave all of the defaults here with the personal type and the free plan, which gets you 2 projects. And then I'll click create organization. Then we'll be set to create a new project. For the project name, I'm going to name it the name of my project, which is Dreams Saver. And then the database password, you need to have a strong password here, and you can just click the generate password button and just let it generate. You don't necessarily need to keep this, but you could copy this and paste it somewhere where you think is secure. And then for the region, I'm selecting East US, which is where a lot of people reside. You could also select any of the other regions here. I will skip the security options and then the advanced configuration. You can always change these later, and then we'll hit create new project. Now, once our Supabase database is up and running, there are a few keys that we need to grab and put into our application. Inside of the project overview, if we scroll down, we have a few project API that we need to copy over into our .env.local file. The first one is the project URL. Just go ahead and hit the copy button over here, then go back to our cursor, and we want to open up the .env.local file, and from here, just go to the next _public_Supabase _URL and paste in what we copied. And then go back to Supabase, and underneath the project URL, we have the API key, and we need to copy this one as well. Now again, back in our environment file, we need to paste it where this anon key is. The next thing that the application wants is the Supabase service role key, and so we can find that back over in Supabase, over on this left-hand side. If we scroll down to project settings, and then inside of project settings, we have API keys over here on the left, and then we have this service role, which is a secret. So you want to keep this from anybody else. You don't want anybody else to be able to see it, but we will need to copy it to our application. So we need to click this reveal button, and then we can click on the copy button. Now again, back in our application, we just hit Control V to paste it back in. Once we're done with those 3 keys, we can hit Control S to save. Now there is something special that we need to do because we have to fill our database with tables. Tables are essentially like, if you've ever used Excel, the spreadsheets that are on there, when you put in data, you put them in different columns, right? So your table is comprised of a bunch of columns, and inside of the table is all of our data. We have information for each user or for each record that we're going to put in for the dreams. So we do need to set up our database correctly. Now, what I like to do is I like to just ask AI to give me all of the SQL, basically all of the code that I need to put onto the database so that it creates all of the tables and everything else for me. So here I'm going to ask the agent, can you print out all of the SQL that I need for my database? Now, once it prints everything out, we can scroll up and find it all, and then we can copy the whole thing. So I'll click on this copy button to copy the entire thing, and now we'll go back to Supabase. So back here inside of Supabase, if we go on the left-hand side, we can click on this SQL editor. From here, we get this neat little editor thing, and all we have to do is Control V in this area here, and it should paste all of our syntax, all of our code here, and then we can hit run and see what happens. Great, for me, it looks like it was successful. No rows returned, which means it worked properly. It created all the tables that we need, and now we can actually run our application and see what we get. So again, back here in the terminal, we run npm run dev, and you can also hit the up arrow on your keyboard to go to your previously ran command, and then we'll hit enter. Now that it's ready, let's again go back to our browser and check out the application. Awesome, look at this. It seems to have created a landing page. We can see Dream Saver here, and then it says unlock the secrets of your dreams with AI insights. That's pretty cool. We scroll down, we can share our first dream. Describe a recent dream to get started with your journey. Now, clearly there are some things that we need to get right. Here it looks like this button is just disabled until I start typing, but then the look of this button is kind of bad, at least for this light version. But if we scroll down, we can check out the rest of the site. AI insights, track patterns, private and secure, simple pricing, $0 for free, 5 free AI insights. And for the premium, everything in free, unlimited AI insights, advanced pattern analysis. I don't really even know what that might be. I guess it might be the labeling stuff that we could have happen, but this is cool. This is the start of what we want. So now that we have things running, this is a good place to set a checkpoint. To get started using Git, we can click on this button over here, this third one from the left. We have the search, and then we have our version control button. And then inside of here, we'll click on initialize repository. Now this will create a repository inside of the project folder that we are working in. Once we click that button, a bunch of files show up on the left-hand side, and we can scroll through them. And these are all of the files that we've added to this project. So since we want to treat this like a checkpoint, we don't really need to go into the specifics on how to use Git. We just need to know how to use it in this scenario. To create our checkpoint, we need to first stage all of these files. To do that in Cursor, if you hover over this bar that says changes, you'll have some icons here, and one of the icons is to stage all changes. You can also hover over each individual file and click the plus button to stage just that file, but generally we just want to stage all of the changes that Cursor has made to our project. So we can click on this stage all changes button. Once we've staged all of our changes, we can then write a message kind of detailing about what occurred in this change. We can either write it out manually, or we can click on this button to generate a commit message using AI. Since this is our first checkpoint, I'm going to manually write initial commit as a message, and then we can hit the commit button to finalize all of these changes. And the word commit is just Git's way of saying checkpoint. So once we hit the commit button, now all of those changes are saved. And down here, we'll actually be able to see the whole tree of all of our changes and all of our checkpoints that we've made. So if we wanted to, we could click on it and we get a detailed list of all of the changes all in one file. Now we have this other button called Publish Branch. And what this is doing is it's taking our local changes, everything that we've made inside of our local repository, and pushing it to a remote repository. Basically, a repository that exists somewhere else off of our computer. Most people will use a website called github.com to store all of their remote repositories. So this is what we're going to use. You can go to github.com and then create a free account. Once you create an account on GitHub, you can go back to Cursor, and now we can click on the Publish Branch button. It should create this pop-up where we want to sign in using GitHub. You want to click Allow, and then you'll want to copy and continue to GitHub. Once you go through that authentication in the browser, you should be able to publish your repository. Now you can either create a private or a public repository depending on what your needs are. I'm going to create a public one so that you can view this code later, but you may want to create a private one so that other people can't see your code. So once you click on create your repository, it'll start publishing up to that repository on GitHub. Then when it's finished, you'll have this pop-up down here, and you can click on open on GitHub to see it on the website. So now that we have it on the website, this is good because this is going to be the basis for when we want to push this to production. Now we can get back to the project and fix some of the problems with it. So I noticed in our command line that we have a bunch of these unsupported metadata, theme color is configured in metadata export errors. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight these right click to copy, and then come over here to our AI agent and then paste this in. And I want it to fix these issues. So I'm going to say fix this issue, and then I'll hit enter and just let it run. At this point, pretty much all we're doing is basically solving our own problems. We find some issue and then we paste it into the AI, and then we get a response back. It changes some code, or it configure something in a different way. At the same time, once it fixes something, we then commit the changes and set our checkpoint. And then we just repeat this process, whether we're creating a new feature or we're just changing the looks of things or how things function inside of the web app. We're just going to continue to go through this loop until we get to a finalized version. So here it's saying it fixed the issue. Now we have our panel here that's still running the application. To cancel the application, to get out of it, we hold Control and we hit C on the keyboard, and it will kill that process. Then we can just hit our up arrow to run the npm run dev command again and hit enter. Now once it's up and running, we need to see if we get that issue again, so we need to load and compile that website. So back over on the website, we have to make sure that we refresh it so that we can compile the application. And then we just check our console to see how it looks. And it looks like we don't have any errors. You can see that it compiled the application and it gave us the website. So again, this is another checkpoint. So what do? We go up here and we type a message about what we just did. So I'm saying for this issue that I fixed the theme issue, and now we can click on the commit button. But if we hit this down arrow, we can do two things at once. We can both commit and push the changes up to our GitHub repository, so we don't have to manually do that. So once we click on this, the changes will automatically take effect on the GitHub website. Of course, we still have this problem with our button here where it's like really white and then over the top of a poorly contrasted button. So what we want to do is we just want to tell the AI that this is the case, and it should be able to fix it. So back in Cursor, we're going to do this a lot. We're going to explain the problem. Now I'm just stating what it is. There are buttons on the page in this light theme that have text in white, and it makes them barely visible. Now let's see if it fixes it. Of course, once it makes some changes, we then go to our console, we hit Control C to kill the process, hit the up arrow, and then start it again. So after refreshing the page, it seems that it didn't fix the issue. So this is where we could use a screenshot to show the actual problem, and then it will use its image analysis to understand what we're talking about. So using print screen or whatever tool that you have to grab a screenshot, you want to highlight what is the issue. So I'm going to hit print screen, and then I'm going to copy this area that is the submit dream and sign up button. And now back in Cursor, all we need to do is Control V to paste that image in. So now it has a reference to what our issue is. Also, I'm going to give it a little explanation saying it doesn't seem to be fixed. Check the image and see what the text is difficult to see. Now we'll see if it can actually fix the issue. So after refreshing the page, it looks like it fixed the contrast issue. We now have like a darker background for this white text. But now let's move on to the next issue, and that is authentication and sign up. So I just typed in something random here. I just said I slept, and then I'll click on this submit dream and sign up button, and there should probably be an error. Yeah, so you can see we get this 400 error, and it says validation failed, unsupported provider is not enabled. Now you could copy and paste this into the AI, and it will instruct you on how to set up the authentication. But since I already knew that this was going to be an issue and I know the fix for this, we're just going to go through the process of fixing it. So one of the things that I wanted to have working for this app is the ability to log in with your Google Gmail account. To do that, like I said earlier in the video, we're using Supabase for all of the authentication. Once you're on your project, if you go to the left-hand sidebar, you'll have this authentication tab. And so we click on that, and it takes us to this users table. Now this is managed by Supabase, so it's not in with all the other tables that we have that we created earlier. If you can see on this left-hand side, we have this sign in /providers. So Google is actually a provider of our authentication. What we're doing is we're using Supabase as a middleman to contact Google, and then Google signs you in, and Supabase understands that, knows it, and holds the information about your account. And then we use that account inside of our application. So if we click on this button, we'll have this Supabase auth. And if we scroll down, we have all of the different providers that we can use. Now we could add other sign-ins like Discord or Facebook, Figma, look at all of these different ones. But the one that we're going to focus on is Google. And the reason I'm choosing this is because it's pretty popular, and a lot of the other authentication methods are similar to how they get set up as they are in Google. However, Google is a little bit more complicated, so I wanted to go through that whole thing inside of this video. So let's click on this Google sign in. Now you'll get this tab over here on the right where we can enable to sign in with Google. So we'll click that to enable this, and now we have a few different things down here that we need to fill out. First is the client ID, and this is what we're going to get from the Google Cloud interface, and then we'll paste it in here along with the client secret. These are important pieces that allow Supabase to contact Google on your application's behalf. The last thing down here is the callback URL, and this is something that we're going to paste into the Google Cloud interface so that it registers a callback when using the sign in with Google method. Basically, it just knows what to redirect back to once you click on which account you want to sign in with Google. So now we need to create an application with Google, and I know this seems pretty complicated, but we'll try to break it down into easy steps. First off, you need to have a Google account in order to do this, and then second off, you need to traverse to this URL. It's console.cloud.google.com. And again, the link is in the description. So once you sign in with your account, you'll be met with this welcome screen. And up here, we'll have this select a project button. What we want to do is click on it. And then up here in the upper right, we'll click on new project. So now we want to input the project name, which is obvious. We'll just put the project name in here. And if this is your first time using it, you won't have an organization here, but that's fine. We can just hit the create button. So now that we have it created, we want to switch to that project so that we can edit the configuration. We can click on this select project button in the banner, or you can click on the select project button here and then select the new project. Now that we're on our project dashboard, none of this really matters. All we need to do is go to the APIs and services. That's over here on the left. If we click on APIs and services, and then once we're on this screen, we need to go over here and click on OAuth consent screen. Here it tells us that the Google Auth platform is not configured yet. That's fine. We'll just hit this get started button. Now this is just information about what will pop up when we do sign in with Google so that it knows what application and what the name is so that the user knows what they're signing into. So once again, we're putting Dreamsaver, and for the user support email, you'll just use the email that you signed in with. Then we can hit the next button, and this next option is asking us whether we're going to use the app internally or if it's going to be an external app so that people anywhere on the internet can use it. Of course, ours is external, so we'll click on the external one and then hit next. Now the contact information email is just the email that you're going to use to get information when Google needs to notify you about something. So this can be any email address that you wish, but you might as well just put the one that you signed in with. Now we just agree to the Google API Services user data policy and then hit continue. Once we're finished with all of these configurations, we can then hit create. Now that we've created our consent screen, we can create our OAuth client. So we'll go here under the metrics and hit create OAuth client. Under application type, I'm doing a web application, so I'm going to select web application. And then we need to give the OAuth client a name. So I'm just calling it Dreamsaver OAuth. And then under authorized redirect URIs, this is where we need to grab the Supabase URI that we had before. So back in Supabase, let's scroll down to the callback URL and copy this URL. And then back in authorized redirect URIs, we need to add that URI by pasting it in. Now we should be able to hit create and it will create our OAuth client. So once the OAuth client is created, we get the client ID and client secret. And you'll remember from before, we need to paste these tokens into Supabase. So let's copy each one of these. The client ID, we'll copy that. We'll go back to Supabase and then paste it into the client ID section. And then we'll go back and we'll copy the client secret and do the same thing for the client secret. Now that we have everything set up over here on the Supabase side, we want to hit save. Make sure you hit save, because if you hit escape or you accidentally hit the exit button, you'll have to do this process over again, because in order to get the client secret, it only gets shown to you during this time. You have to download a file in order to see the secret again. So you might as well hit the save button. So great, now our Google provider is enabled, but we're not quite done on what we need to do for this authentication. Over here on the left, we need to click on URL configuration. Inside of here, by default, it has the HTTP localhost 3000 because that's where we're running. Our npm run dev runs it on port 3000. So we know that this is the URL for the site. But now we need to add a redirect URL so that once the authentication finishes with Google, it then redirects back to Supabase, but then Supabase needs to redirect back to our app. So we have to add a URL here that is the endpoint for when Supabase finishes its authentication and redirects it back to our application. Now, I currently don't know that redirect URL, so I'm going to ask the AI to tell me what that redirect is. All right, so here I'm being a little wordy and asking it something specific. I said I've enabled Google authentication through Supabase, but now I need the redirect URL back to the application to redirect from Supabase once authentication is complete. What is the URL that I should add to the redirect URLs? Also, I did forget to set a checkpoint once we finished that button theme redesign design. So over here on the left, make sure that we add the message here, and I'm saying the button contrast issue fixed, and then I will commit these changes and push them up. Okay, so here it's telling me a few different URLs. It says add both URLs here, and what I want to do is copy this. So I'm adding localhost 3000 auth callback. So I just highlighted it and hit Control C to copy. And then back here, we'll hit add URL, and then I will paste that URL in, and I will hit save URLs. So now that that's all saved, let's try signing up again. I just type something in here and I'll hit submit dream and sign up. Okay, cool. Now it takes me to sign in with Google, and it has this continue to, and then that's the redirect back from Google that we pasted inside of the redirects. And so it goes back to there, and then it should redirect back to our application. We'll see if there are any errors when we do. So I'm going to select one of these accounts and sign in. So now it's saying sign into, and then it has this link back to Supabase. Now we can change this later, but it does require the paid plan inside of Supabase. So that might be something you want to do once you get to production. Now we can hit continue and see where it redirects us to. Okay, so a moment there, it did redirect us to our application and it took us to the dashboard, but we did run into an error. Now we just rinse and repeat. We go through the loop, we paste in this error to AI, it fixes it, and then we set a checkpoint. So once again, in our terminal here, we're going to highlight the whole error message all the way up until we see these 200s, and then copy it. I copy by hitting right click. I don't know if it's the same in all operating systems or all cursor applications, but you can just hit right click and it will copy to your clipboard. And then over here, we just paste it in and then hit enter, see what happens. So now it made some changes. I'm gonna hit Control C and then rerun the application. Okay, look, it seemed to have fixed it. Now I'm at my dashboard. You can see I have this stuff in my dashboard. This is kind of neat. I can do a new dream. I could upgrade. This is kind of messed up. It says NaN out of 5 insights. But down here, it says I can record my first dream down here. Now I did type in the dream thing and it didn't create my dream, but that might just be an issue with, since we had some errors before, that might be the problem, but we'll just see. We can fix all of those using AI, like it's going to be no problem. So let's go ahead and lock in those changes and create a new checkpoint over here. I'll say we implemented the dashboard and authentication, and then I'll ship this away. Now my process is literally just repeating these steps over and over again. I go and prompt AI with something that needs to change, and then I check to see if there are any errors, copy and paste them in, and I keep doing this process of committing all of those changes so that we have a new checkpoint and doing it over and over again until we have a final project. Now that we have the dashboard working and the sign-in and authentication working, we have two things left that we want to do before we push to production. We have this on our dreamsaver.com website. And those two things are specifically for this app. I want to show how to get a Gemini API key, and also I want to show how to do a Stripe integration. The first one is the Gemini API key, and this is pretty simple. We need to go to aistudio.google.com and sign in with the same account that we used to create the Google Cloud application. Then inside of here, all we have to do is hit this Get API Key button. Now from here, over here on the right, we hit Create API Key. Next, we have to select the application that we used before. So we'll hover over this and then we'll select Dreamsaver. Now we'll just make sure that we hit Create API Key in existing project, and it creates our API key here. Now we have to hit this copy button. If we close out of this, we have to do that process over again. So just make sure that you hit the copy button, and then back in our environment file, we will paste that key in. Now we should have Gemini available to us anytime. However, we do have to set up a billing account if we want to exceed the free tier of using this API key, which you can check out what those access levels are by going to the aistudio.google.com, being in the studio, and then over here on the chat window, we have this selection of which model we want to use. And if we hover over it, we get a detailed outlook as to what we can be looking at in terms of pricing. And here at the bottom, you'll see that for this particular model, we get 10 requests per minute and 500 requests per day. Now, if you're using Gemini AI in your application, you might want to go through each one of these and see which one you want to choose, because some of them are a lot cheaper than others. However, this is honestly a great price, and it's great for our testing environment. But I also want to make sure that we are using this. So I'm going to copy the name of this model and hit Control C on my keyboard. And then back in Cursor, I'm going to just prompt our AI and ask it to make sure that we're using the correct model. So I'm just saying, can you make sure that we're using the Gemini model for our AI in the application? and then I pasted the model name there. So it says it updated my model to the one that I requested, and now we can hit Control C to kill our process and run it again just to test it out. So now when we're trying to record our dream and test things out, we have a few issues here. If we go to the dream description and then just type something random and then scroll down and click on the save dream button, we might get this spinning indefinitely. And if we go to our console, we don't actually see any errors coming out here. We can't really understand what the problem is. It's just not saving. Well, there's another place to check for any errors or any issues, and that's our developer console on the browser. To get to the developer console, at least for the Brave browser that I'm in, is you hold Control Shift and then you hit J. This will be true for any Chrome-like browser, but really you can click on the settings over here and then go to more tools, and you're probably looking for something like the developer tools on your specific browser, and it opens up this panel down here. Now we actually can't see any issues yet, but we might be able to if we run this again. You can see I refreshed and I have like these warnings and an error here. And when I click save dream, I'm now getting this failed to save dream, please try again. And inside of here, we can see that we had this post request. It tried to fetch something from the database, and then it errored there, and it also had an error saving the dream. It says could not find the description column of dreams in the schema cache. Basically, we're just going to copy and paste all of this stuff into the AI agent and have it fix all of our issues. So we can just highlight these two errors and copy them and paste them into our AI agent. I'm also going to add that I'm on the creation of a new dream page. So I'm saying I'm on the creation of the new dream page, and when I hit save dream, I get these in the developer console. Hopefully it just fixes everything. And now, like here, it sometimes tells you to update your SQL schema, and basically we have to do that on Supabase. So it created this file with all of our SQL that we need to have. I'm just going to hit Control A and copy this, and then we'll go back to Supabase. And we need to do the same thing that we did when we created the tables. We have to go over here to the SQL editor, and I'm going to hit the plus sign so I get a fresh new instance, and then paste this in. And then once I have this pasted in, hopefully this is the correct SQL schema that we need, and we'll hit run. And this is just a warning saying that we have just a destructive operation. This is okay. We're still developing. We're still trying to figure things out. So I'll just say run this query. Now I'm getting this error, and again, rinse and repeat. I'm going to copy this error and then go back to cursor and paste it in here, and then let the AI tell me what to do next. It looks like it updated the database schema file, and it's telling me to do essentially the same thing that I just did. So I'll copy this again, and I'm going to select everything in here and then paste over this and then hit run again. Now that I get success, hopefully this works. I'm going to go back to the application and restart it though. Okay, so now that we've made updates to the database, let's go ahead and hit save dream again. It looks like it successfully saved the dream, and now we have this AI insights. It says unlock to upgrade, but we should be able to do at least one AI insight. I wonder if it's just not configured correctly in order to do it. But back in the cursor, since we did resolve all of our initial database issues, let's go ahead and make a checkpoint. I'm going to use the generate commit message and just let it generate, and then I will hit commit and push. Also, periodically, I like to start a new chat just because it cleans things up and it allows it to start with a fresh context. It'll just give us better results. So generally, I like to hit this plus button to create a new chat and then start again. So let's describe our feature here. I'm saying I want it to be automatic for the first 5 insights on the free tier. So I'm telling it that, and hopefully it can just resolve our issue here of having to upgrade in order for us to see any AI insights. And now it looks like it's just one thing after another. We're now getting an unauthorized when we do the AI insight request. And it looks like in our console, we have this trace. Let's go ahead and copy and paste this into our agent and let it fix it. Okay, so now this has to be the time that we can do it. I'll hit generate AI insight. And look at that, we finally have our AI insights. We can see it here. It says, the dream, despite it being seemingly paradoxical nature, could represent a core tension between achievement and subsequent loss of control or feeling of emptiness. Okay, that's fun. Okay, so now that we have AI generating an insight for our dreams, we basically have a complete product here, except we need to add a payment gateway, and that's where Stripe comes in. Stripe is a payment processor platform that makes it easy just to integrate directly into our application so that we can get paying customers. You'll need to go to stripe.com and sign up for an account. Now we'll just go through the process of creating an account. Then once you've created it, it'll go to this dashboard and it'll have this onboarding process where it guides you through how to create a business name and a website and allow you to use Stripe. However, I'm going to skip this for now because I want to show you a different way of how to create each account. Once you're on the dashboard, we go over here to the left and click the down arrow. Now inside of here, we want to go to other accounts and click on create account. Now here's where we give it a name, and we're going to name it the name of our project. Then select your country and hit create. And now we'll kind of go through that whole guided onboarding process. What we want to do is select recurring payments because that's how our app is going to operate. And then we'll just hit the continue button. Next, you can hit the go to sandbox button. And the sandbox is an environment that you can test in so that you don't actually have any real money transactions happening. So now let's just go through the setup guide. I'll click on choose a pricing model over here in the bottom right. Now based on your pricing model, you'll choose something here. I'm going to choose flat rate because I'm charging people at the end of the month. Then we can just hit save. And now we'll just move to the next thing, which says choose how to accept recurring payments. And for our application, we want to actually traverse to a page to do the whole Stripe checkout process. So we're going to select this pre-built checkout form and then hit save. Now we want to create a recurring product because this is how we actually get paid. Now for my app, I only have one recurring product. Let's look at what it's called. If I go back to my application and hit on upgrade, it takes me to this subscription page where we have the free plan, which we don't actually need to make a recurring product inside of Stripe for. And then we have what we call this premium plan, and I'll keep it the same name. So I'm going to call it premium. I'm just going to copy this and then paste it in as our name. I'm going to leave the description empty. You can add a description here to signify what you're getting for this premium, but since it's already on the application in the pricing page, I don't feel the need to add this description. And then we scroll down and we select recurring because it's going to be charged every month and the amount. And we're going to say $8 because that's how I priced it out. Now I'm selecting monthly. Make sure that your unit quantity is 1, and then we can hit add product. Now the last thing that you need to do in order to actually start getting payments is setting up your business. You'll have to fill out this whole profile to not only verify your business with Stripe, but also to accept payments. So you need to walk through this whole account activation before you can even get any payouts from Stripe. Now it might take a while in order for them to verify your business or who you are, I guess. But in the meantime, you can still test out the Stripe product and get it hooked up into your application. So here on the main homepage, we need to grab a couple keys. Over here on the right, we have these API keys. We need to grab both the publishable key and the secret key. What we can do is just click on it and it'll automatically copy it to our clipboard. And then back in our application, we want to go to our environment file and paste these keys with the correct names. So the publishable key is shown on the browser in the client. And so it has this next_public. And then we have the name, which is Stripe publishable key. So I'll paste the key here, and then we go back to Stripe and copy the secret key. And then again, paste the key under Stripe secret key. Now that we have both of these, we need to grab the product ID as well as the pricing ID. So back in Stripe, go over to the left and click on product catalog. And inside the product catalog, we want to click on the one product that we created. And from here, we should have under details, the product ID. We can just click on this to copy it to our clipboard again. And now I'm going to have the agent do all of this work because I don't want to have to figure out where to place this product ID and the pricing ID. So I'm telling the agent, I have created my Stripe account and I'm currently in the sandbox. For the premium subscription, here are my product ID and pricing IDs. Please make these environment variables so that I can change them in production. And the reason we do this is because the pricing ID and the product ID are both going to be different in production than they are in testing. And that's because we have to create the product again in live mode, so they'll have different product IDs and pricing IDs. So we want them to be configurable, so just pull them out as environment variables so that we can configure them and we don't have to edit code directly in production. So then I have my product ID right here and we need to grab the pricing ID. To do that, under premium, we have this pricing and we can just click on it. And then on the pricing page over here on the right, we have the price. We can just click on that to copy it to our clipboard. Then we'll just paste this in and now we can just let the agent do all of the work to set up both our product and our price. Okay, so it looks like it completed everything. We just need to put the Stripe product ID and Stripe price ID environment variables in our environment file and then paste in each of the values. So I copied the product ID and pasted it where I needed to for the Stripe product ID. And then I copy the price ID and paste it where the price ID is. But in actuality, I know this isn't right because I know we need to have next_public in front of each one of these, the product ID and the price ID. And the reason for that is because we need it to be accessible from the browser and not from our backend server. But just to be sure, I'm going to ask the agent and I'm going to say, shouldn't there be a next_public in front of the product and price ID environment variables? And it does tell me that I'm right. There should be that next_public. So let's go ahead and copy these into our environment file. Now with these environment variables corrected, we can save this file and we can restart the server. Oh, and also I did forget to share that I did make another checkpoint because we finished that Gemini API stuff. So I created that checkpoint and now everything else we're going to have probably one more checkpoint for the Stripe stuff and be done with that. So now with all of that done, we can go back to our application and then hit upgrade to see our Stripe path. So now in the subscriptions, I scroll down, I'm going to hit upgrade to premium. And of course, like always, like clockwork, we always have an issue and we're getting this some error here. So like we do, we rinse and repeat. We put this into the agent and see what it gives us. Now after restarting the server, let's hit upgrade to premium. So look at that, it takes me to the Stripe checkout page. So now I can subscribe to premium for $8 a month. Also, don't worry, we're not doing real transactions. We're in sandbox mode. You can see that up here. So they're not actually real transactions. And we're also using a dummy card. They allow us to use some dummy data. So this is what we're using, the 4242 all the way across. And then you can make up the rest of the data however you want. It won't be actually charged. So then we have the one-click checkout. Next time that we do this, we don't have to write all of this information again. We can just do the one-click checkout with link, and then we'll hit subscribe. But we do have errors, so let's clean that up. So one of the issues that we ran into was that when we actually hit the upgrade button, we don't get the user to get upgraded to the premium subscription. And you can check that out in the database if we go to our users, that this Stripe customer ID isn't filled in. And the reason for this is because we have to set up a webhook in order for our application to know that the payment was processed. So one of the tools needed to do this locally is using the Stripe CLI tool. If we go down here to the left and click on developers and then scroll up until you can click on webhooks, it should open up your workbench, and under here we have this button to test with a local listener. Once you get that, you get this option to download the Stripe CLI tool, so we need to click on this. Now depending on your operating system, you need to select the correct distribution. I'm on Windows, so I'm going to select the Windows one. It tells me to download the latest Windows zip file from GitHub, so we click on GitHub, and then we go to the release pages. We scroll down to our particular operating system. I'm on a Windows x86-64. That's probably what you're on too. And then we click on this to download the executable. Once you download that zip file and open it up, you'll have this stripe.exe file. We need to put this in a location where we can access. So you'll need to extract this to whatever folder that you want, but then make sure that you grab the path for that folder. So I've extracted it to this folder, and then I need to copy this path up here. Now we need to open up our environment variables, and to do that, you hit the Windows key and type in environment. Under settings, you should have edit system environment variables, and we can click on that. Now inside of here, click on environment variables. Now we need to traverse down in the bottom section to the path variable and double click on it. From here, we can click new and then paste that path in right here. Then you can hit enter and hit OK, and then hit OK again. Now back inside of Cursor, we want to create a new terminal instance. So we can do that by hitting this plus button right here or hitting the down arrow and selecting which terminal we want. I'm going to be using the command prompt since I did all of this inside of the Windows environment. So I'll click on command prompt. It should open up a new terminal for me to work in. And now we need to log into our account using that Stripe CLI tool. So we'll type in Stripe login. Once you type Stripe login, hit enter, and it will go through an interactive login on the browser. If the URL doesn't open up immediately for you, you can hold Control and click on it. Then once it opens up in your browser, make sure that these words are the same words that are in your terminal right now, and then hit allow access. Now that we have access, we can type one command and start listening to webhook events from Stripe. And that one command is down here. It's kind of hard to see, but it says Stripe listen --forward-2, and then the URL that we're using this for, which is http://localhost:3000/API/webhook/Stripe. Once we do that, we can hit enter and it should be ready to go, but we do need to copy this signing secret. So we'll highlight it, and I do just a right click to copy this over. So I'll right click and then I will paste it into our Stripe webhook secret up here in our environment file. Now we can save this file. I'm going to go back to the other terminal. You can switch between terminals over here on the right. I'm going to go back to the other terminal and start up the server again. Now make sure before you test this out again that we delete the customer inside of Stripe. And to do that, we can go over to the left-hand side and click on customers. And then inside customers, click on the customer, the one that we created. And then scroll down, and under the selection of the subscription, over here on the right, we can cancel the subscription. We click that and we cancel it immediately, no refund, and click the button at the bottom. And back in our app, once it's reloaded, we want to go through the upgrade process again. So inside subscription, I'm going to click upgrade to premium. Now, since we already went through setting up the whole checkout process earlier, we get this nice little confirmation that it's me, and you just type in 00000. Now we can click subscribe, and hopefully it all works correctly. And all right, now it looks like we're on the premium subscription. You can see the AI Insights now has the infinity sign. There's no more upgrade button up here. And if we check out the database, we can see that our user is premium is set, and our Stripe customer ID is in here. Now that we have Stripe tested and working, we can finally deploy to production, and we're going to use Vercel to do that. So you can go to vercel.com and sign up for an account. When you're signing up, you probably want to select the hobby plan because most of our applications are probably going to fall under that hobby tier, and you don't need to pay for that pro tier. Now, once you're finished logging in, you'll want to scroll down here and import a Git repository. Since we pushed all of our code up to GitHub, we might as well use GitHub and then import that into Vercel. So let's click on continue with GitHub. Then once you sign in and authenticate with GitHub, you should have a list of all of the projects, all of the repositories inside of your GitHub account. And for the ones that are specifically using Next.js, you'll have this neat little logo here that identifies it as a Next.js project. And what we can do is just click on this import button and start the new project process for Vercel. Once you get to this screen, it pulls in all of the necessary information. You don't really need to change much here. The only thing that we do need to change is we need to add all of those environment variables that we have in our .env file. So under environment variables, if we open this up, it actually says down here that we can paste a .env file above to populate the form. So let's do that. So back in cursor, if we select the .env.local file that we've been working with, and then hit Control A to select all of the text, and then hit Control C on our keyboard, we can then go back to Vercel and hit Control V to paste it in. You just have to make sure that your cursor is focused on this text box, and then you can hit Control V and it will paste all of our environment variables into this section. Now there are some things that we want to change with these environment variables, but we'll do that later. Right now we can just keep it as is, and then we'll scroll down and we can hit this deploy button. If we scroll down to the deployment, we can actually see the build logs of it deploying, and we can see any issues that might come up. Sometimes when you're using the npm run dev command to run everything in the development environment, you actually get different errors than when you build the project. So we can see that in our package.json, we have this build script, and what it's doing is we run npm run build, which we can run on our local. Like if we kill our running application, we could then run npm run build, and it will do the same thing that it's currently doing in Vercel. This just can take a while to do because it's packaging all of the files together and putting them into one distribution. So it just takes a little bit of time. So it looks like our build failed to compile. And if we check out the logs, we can see that it failed to compile here. And it's saying that there's a type error, existing tag is possibly null. I think it's best just to wait for this local build to run and see what the error is. And once we get that error, we can just send that over to the AI agent and have it resolve it. All right, so our local build did find the issue as well. So let's just copy this whole thing, and then we will paste it into our AI agent, and hopefully it just resolves it. Then once it's finished, we just keep running the build and finding any errors, fixing them, and continue until we have a clean build. We'll checkpoint that point and send all of that code up to GitHub, and then we'll try to redeploy again in Vercel. Okay, so we've made the fixes, and now we'll create a checkpoint. I'm just going to let this generate automatically, and then I will hit commit and push. And then back over here on our product page, we need to just hit go to project so that it just comes to the project. We don't need to inspect the deployment because we've already checked that out locally and figured out all of the issues. So we'll click on go to project, and here is telling us no production deployment. And that's just because we're currently building the one that we just sent over. So now once this builds and completes the build, we'll have this production deployment in here. And now that the build completed, our app is actually running, and we can click on this domain right here, the dreamsaver.vercel.app, and open it up. And now we can see the live version of our application on the web, so anybody could look at this. Now there are a few things that we want to do. The first of which is we want to set up that domain that we bought from earlier in the video. To do that, we can click on this domains button over here, and then we can click add domain. If you didn't actually buy a domain, you could buy one from Vercel itself. They use some other DNS service, but you could buy one from Vercel. I'm just going to click add domain because I already own it. And then we type our domain in right here, and we're going to be connecting to the production environment. So we'll select production here, and then we can hit save. Now, when you first do this, you're going to need to verify that domain. To do that, we can click on this, and then it tells us what we need to add to our DNS service in order for this to get verified. So this is saying add a text type, and the name is _Vercel, and then all of this junk here. So if we go back to Hostinger, we can click on manage under this domain, and then over here on the left, click on DNS/name servers. Now under DNS records, we need to add that text type. So we scroll down, we go to manage DNS records, we select the type, and it's text. So I'll just start typing. And then we have this txt type, and then the name, which we said was _Vercel. And then the text value, we need to go back, and then we'll copy this value. We'll just hit this copy button right here, and then we'll go back to the Hostinger and paste it in. Then we can just click add record, and hopefully in a little bit it will verify. We can try to speed up the verification process by clicking on the refresh button. And since we added two different domains here, one was www and the other one was just dreamsaver.com, we need to do the same thing for this dreamsaver.com one. So I'll just copy this value over here so that I keep it on my paste bin, and then I add all of the same information again and click on add record. Now back here, just hit the refresh button, and hopefully it refreshes and it has a valid configuration. And there we go. Now we can click on the domain and it will take us to dreamsaver.com with the correct address. Now, unfortunately, we're not quite done because our login isn't going to work right. If you remember from earlier, I mentioned about this site URL, and we had it set to localhost 3000 inside of Supabase. Well, you have two different options here because we can only have one site URL. You can either set up this site URL for production and also add the redirect callbacks for production, or you can create a new project that has the production level database, and we'll have to copy many of the things that we did earlier for all of the Supabase stuff. And to be honest, you should do that because you want to have a separation between your development database and your production database, because you might be making wild changes to your development database and you don't want those to upset any of the production clients that you currently have. So let's go ahead and create a new project and update all of the environment keys that we use for Supabase. First things first though, I'm going to change the project name from Dreamsaver to Dreamsaver-dev so that I know that this is the development environment. So to create a new project, we go up here and we hit this little up and down arrow and then select new project. Now we keep it the same organization. Remember I said that you can only have two projects for the free tier of these organizations. So this is kind of perfect for us because we only need two. But the first thing that we want to do is give it the name, and we'll call it Dreamsaver-prod. And again, for the database password, we'll just click on generate a password, and we don't need to do anything else here. And we'll just hit create new project. Now we need to run those same SQL scripts that we ran for the development project inside of the production one. So first thing is switch back to the development one, and we'll click on these up and down arrow again and then select dev. And over here on the left, click on SQL editor. Now what's nice is we have the history of all of the things that we've ran successfully over here on the left. So we can see all of the SQL updates that we've ran. So we'll select each one from bottom to top and then go back to the production and go to the SQL editor and paste it in and run them. So here's this first one, and then we'll select the production and then we will paste it in and then go ahead and hit run. It should be successful. Now we'll go back to the dev, go to the next one and rinse and repeat. Select all, go back to prod, select all, paste, and then run. We still want to run this query. Once again in dev, select the next one, select all, copy, go back to prod, select all, paste, and then run again. Thankfully, I only have one more here to run. I go back to prod, select all, paste, and then run. And now all of our tables should be set up here in our database. If we check out the table editor, we should have all of the tables that we had in the dev version over here on prod now. And now all we need to do is set up the authentication that we have in dev, but in prod. So over here on the left, click on authentication and then click on sign in/providers. Scroll down until we get to Google because that's the provider that we're going to use. Click enable with Google, and now we need to grab the client ID and secret that we had before. So back in our Google Cloud platform, we need to select the Dreamsaver OAuth that we created from the beginning. And inside of here, we have underneath additional information, we have the client ID, so we can copy this section here with Control C and paste it into our client IDs. And then if you scroll down, we have also the client secrets, which we can just click on this copy client secret button. And then back in Supabase, paste in that client secret. And once again, scroll down until we have the callback URL. Since this is now a new URL, we need to copy this. And then back in our OAuth, under authorized redirect URIs, we need to add another URI, and we just paste that link in. Then make sure that you hit save, and things should be ready for you to use in production. However, like I said earlier, we need to update update that URL configuration. So over here on the left under authentication, we go to URL configuration, and we'll change this site URL to the new site URL that we're using in Vercel. Now just be aware, since we did add the www subdomain, we need to have that as the site URL. Otherwise things can get messed up. Also make sure that you add the S in HTTPS, because now we're not using localhost, which was just the HTTP protocol. We're now using the SSL protocol. And then under redirect URLs, we need to add that one redirect URL that we have in our application. Now I can't quite remember it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back to dev to see what it was. I can see that it's localhost 3000 auth callback. So I know that I need to add that to production. So let me switch back to production, and then I'll click add URL. And from here we do the HTTPS ://, and then I have www, don't forget that, dreamsaver.com, and then /auth/callback. And now I can hit save URLs. And now from a Supabase standpoint, everything should be good to go in terms of authentication. However, we do need to grab all of those API keys that we did earlier and add them to our Vercel environment variables. So on the home page, scroll down until we get to our project API down here, and we'll just do the project URL first. So hit the copy button over here, and we'll go back to our Vercel project, and we need to click on settings all the way up here. And then on the left-hand sidebar, click on environment variables. Scroll down until we get to the environment variables, and we need to replace some of these. So this first one is the Supabase URL. We need to replace this. So we click on the three dots over here on the right and hit edit. And then for the value, I will just replace it. And don't forget to hit save down here. Next, back in Supabase for the API key, we copy that one, and we want to replace the Supabase anon key. So we click on the three dots, hit edit, select all of this, paste the new key in, scroll down and hit save. And the last one we need to replace is the service role key. So back in Supabase, we go over to the left, we scroll down to project settings, and then inside of project settings on the left-hand side, we click on API keys, and then we have our service role key right here. We need to hit reveal, and then we can copy this. And then once again, back in Vercel, we click on the three dots, we hit edit, we copy this, and then we select this, and then we paste it in, and now we can hit save. Now, when I edit environment variables here, I don't know if it persists to the currently running website. So what I like to do is go to deployments, and then I go over here to the top level deployment. So I have the one that's currently running, and I hit these three dots and then click on redeploy, because I want to redeploy with the new environment variables. And then you get this pop-up, scroll down, and I like to check mark this use existing build cache, since we're not actually changing anything here, and then click on redeploy. Now that it's finished deploying, let's check it out and see if we can sign in and use the application. So now that I'm on dreamsaver.com, I'm going to scroll down, I'm going to click on the sign in button, and now we have the same sign in as before, but now we're using the production database. That seemed to work flawlessly. We're now signed in our Dreamsaver dashboard. Let's check out a record and see if we can create a new record. Now I've recorded my dream, I'll click on save dream. So it's updated my dream, and if I scroll down, let's see if we can generate an AI insight. Awesome. It did that pretty quickly. It generated this whole insight. I don't really care about the formatting here because this isn't a real app that I'm trying to sell, but it looks pretty good. We have everything running exactly as we did in our local environment. We can even hit the upgrade button over here and then select the upgrade to premium. And unfortunately, this won't quite work. And the reason for that is because we didn't set up a webhook for our website. So let's go back to Stripe and set up that webhook. Over here on the left-hand side, click on developers and then go to webhooks. And here we need to add a destination. So we'll click on add destination button right here. It should be under your account. And then we need to select the events. Now, I don't know exactly all of the events that I need. So in Cursor, we might as well just ask. So here I'm asking it, what events does my webhook listen for in Stripe? I need to set up the Stripe webhook, and I need to select the appropriate events for my application. So here it looks like it's telling us exactly how to add this webhook to Stripe. So we need to select these particular events: the checkout session completed, customer subscription updated, and customer subscription deleted. So underneath our events, we'll just search for those. So we have checkout session completed right here. We'll make sure that that's check marked. And then we have customer subscription created and customer subscription deleted. Now that we've selected those events, let's click on continue. And of course, we want it to be a webhook endpoint. We'll hit continue again. And under the destination name, I'm going to call it Vercel-production. And for the endpoint URL, we need to use our endpoint, which in my case is the www.dreamsaver.com API webhook Stripe. I don't really care about the description, so I'm going to leave it blank, and then I'll hit create destination. Now the last thing that we need to do is we need to select this signing secret and add it to our environment variables. So over here on the right, click the eyeball button and then click the copy to clipboard button. Now again, back in Vercel, we go to settings, we go to environment variables, we scroll down until we get that stripe key, and under stripe webhook secret, we click the three dots, click on edit, highlight all of this and paste the new secret in here, and then we hit save. Now again, I'm paranoid, so I go to deployments, I click on the three dots and I click on redeploy. Oh, I almost forgot, we need to update the next public app URL. So let's click the three dots here. It's set to localhost 3000. We need to set this to that Dreamsaver URL. So after setting it to your URL, we hit save, and then we redeploy. All right, now that we're back up and running, let's click on upgrade to premium. This time, everything should work. Now in Stripe, again, we're still in that sandbox mode. Make sure that you're still in the sandbox mode, and then we'll hit subscribe. And just like that, it processed my payment. All of my AI insights is now at infinity, and I don't have any restrictions anymore. So now we successfully have everything working in production. The only thing left to do is to take our Stripe from our sandbox environment to our live environment. So if I click exit sandbox, once you set up your business, you can then go to your live account and then you choose what to copy. So you can either copy nothing, or we can copy all of those products over. So here, the only things that we can copy over are our brand settings, which is just what your business is set up as. And then we hit continue. Now, once you're here in live, if you go to product catalog, you don't have your product in here, you have to recreate it. And also your publishable key and your secret key are different now. So you have to add those to your environment variables, and you'll have to set up the webhooks again. So you'll need to click on developers and go to webhooks and do all of that over again. Unfortunately, there's no real way of copying from Sandbox over to the live version. I don't know why, but once you do add the product and add all of the environment variables and add the webhook, everything should be working in production and you should be able to receive money. With that being said, we've successfully built a product. We've taken something from an idea all the way to a production level application, and we've done it all through vibe coding. Now, I know that this does take a little bit of effort. It's not like it's just an easy thing to do, but if you follow everything that I showed you here, you will have an app in production and accepting payments from customers and getting customers, all without really touching any code. I do want to say thank you for watching, and if you made it all the way through this video, you're a trooper because it's a long one. If you did enjoy the video or learned anything along the way, hit that like button because it really does help me out and it helps this video out. Also subscribe if you want to see more tutorials like this. And lastly, VibeCodeDocs is an app that I created, so if you do use it, it does benefit the channel. Plus, the first project is free, so this is a little bit of a shameless plug at the end of the video. And thank you for watching, and that is how you vibe code an app from start to finish, all without touching a single bit of code.